The war room of Shadow Peak Castle held the smell of old leather and older grief. King Aldric Silvercrest stood alone before maps that told stories of failure. Red markers dotted the parchment like drops of blood, each one representing a warrior who had vanished into the dark spaces between kingdoms. 8 women, 8 of the finest fighters his realm had ever produced. Gone. 18 months since Morrigan died in his arms, and Aldric still could not sleep through the night. He was 34 years old, broad-shouldered and battle-hardened. With a black beard he kept trimmed military short and golden eyes that had witnessed more death than any man should carry. The Alpha King of 5 territories, commander of 3,000 soldiers, master of a castle that had never fallen to siege. None of it mattered when he closed his eyes and saw his mate's face in those final moments, the black veins spreading across her skin, the confusion in her crystalline blue eyes, the way she had whispered about shadows in the castle, words he had dismissed as fever dreams. He should have listened. The door opened without ceremony. Captain Gareth Ironside entered the way he always did, with the confidence of a man who had earned his authority through decades of combat rather than birthright. At 45, Gareth was more scar tissue than smooth skin, his face weathered by sun and steel. He had trained Aldric when the young prince first learned to hold a sword, had stood beside him through border wars and assassination attempts, had buried his own son after a raid went wrong 3 years back. "You have not slept again," Gareth said. It was not a question. Sleep is for men who are not haunted by their mistakes. Aldric did not look up from the maps. 8 warriors, Gareth, 8 of Morrigan's best, vanished like smoke. "You cannot command if you are dead inside. She would not have wanted this. Do not presume to tell me what my mate would have wanted." The words came out sharper than intended. Aldric exhaled, forcing his wolf back down. "Forgive me. I know you mean well." Gareth moved to stand beside him, studying the marked locations. "Captain Marcus has new intelligence. Something you need to hear." As if summoned by his name, Captain Marcus Stonehelm entered with the careful precision that defined everything he did. At 38, Marcus ran the kingdom's intelligence networks with a mind that saw patterns others missed. Where Gareth was all instinct and aggression, Marcus was calculation and patience. Together, they formed the core of Aldric's command structure. "Your Majesty." Marcus unrolled a second map, this one marked with different symbols. "I have been tracking Alara Nightshade's movements over the past 2 years. Every diplomatic journey, every inspection tour, every supply negotiation. Alara, Morrigan's second in command for 15 years, the red-haired strategist who had stood at his mate's side through countless battles. Aldric trusted her the way soldiers trusted their weapons. "Show me," he said. Marcus placed his map alongside Aldric's. The correlation was immediate and damning. Every location where a Moonguard sentinel had disappeared, Alara had visited within the month prior. "It could be coincidence," Aldric said, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. 8 coincidences? Marcus's voice held no accusation, only the careful neutrality of a man presenting facts. "Your Majesty, I am not suggesting treason, but the pattern exists. It demands investigation." The third member of Aldric's inner circle arrived before he could respond. Captain Thaddeus Wolfscar moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent decades training elite fighters. At 42, he still sparred with warriors half his age, and usually won. He had been the Moonguard Sentinel's primary weapons instructor before Morrigan's death, and he believed in those women with a conviction that bordered on religious faith. "I heard my name being taken in vain," Thaddeus said, though his expression turned serious when he saw the maps. "Please tell me you are not about to suggest what I think you are suggesting." "Captain Marcus has identified a pattern," Aldric said carefully. "Alara's travel coincides with the disappearances. Alara served beside Morrigan for 15 years. She mourned her death as deeply as anyone." "Did she?" The question came from Gareth, who had remained silent during the exchange. "Or did she mourn the end of living in Morrigan's shadow?" The words hung in the air like drawn steel. Aldric felt something shift in his chest, a recognition he had been avoiding for months. Morrigan had tried to warn him about shadows in the castle, about not trusting everyone. He had thought she meant external threats, but what if— "We investigate quietly," he said finally. "No accusations, no public inquiries. but I want to know everywhere Alara has been, everyone she has spoken with, and every communication she has sent beyond our borders." "And if we find evidence of betrayal?" Marcus asked. "Then we act accordingly." Aldric's voice carried the weight of alpha command, the tone that made every wolf in the vicinity instinctively submit. "But we do this carefully. If Alara is guilty of treason, she will not be the only one involved. Moving too quickly could alert co-conspirators." The three captains nodded in unison. 15 years of fighting together had taught them to think as one unit. They would investigate. They would uncover the truth. And if that truth proved Alara had betrayed Morrigan, Aldric pushed the thought away, one step at a time. "There is something else," Marcus said, producing a sealed scroll from his coat. "This arrived at your private chambers this morning. No messenger, no seal, just this." Aldric broke the unmarked wax and unrolled the parchment. The message was written in careful block letters, deliberately anonymous. "Your Luna's killers sell her warriors at the Bloodstone Market, 3 days south in disputed territory. Go alone if you want truth. They auction the next group in 2 days." "It is a trap," Gareth said immediately. "Someone wants you isolated and vulnerable." "Or it is someone inside the conspiracy who has developed a conscience," Marcus countered. "The Bloodstone Market is real. It operates in the gray spaces between territories where no single alpha claims authority. If Morrigan's warriors are alive and being sold as slaves—" Thaddeus did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Aldric studied the message, his tactical mind weighing odds and possibilities. A trap seemed likely, but if there was even a chance that the women Morrigan had trained, the sisters she had loved like daughters, were suffering in chains. "I am going," he said. "Your Majesty, you cannot—" Gareth stopped when Aldric met his eyes. There was no arguing with that look. They all knew it. 12 elite guards in civilian clothes, Aldric continued. "We travel as merchants. If it is a trap, we will be ready. If it is legitimate intelligence, we extract whoever we find and burn the market to ash." "And if Alara discovers you have left the castle?" Marcus asked. "Tell her I am inspecting the northern garrisons. 3-day journey. By the time she realizes the truth, we will already be at the market." The captains exchanged glances, the kind of silent communication that came from years of reading each other in combat situations. Finally, Gareth nodded. "If you are going to do something catastrophically stupid, we might as well do it together. I will select the guards." "I will arrange supplies and cover story," Marcus added. "And I will pray to whatever gods might be listening that we find them alive," Thaddeus finished. Aldric felt something approximating gratitude, though the emotion felt distant behind the wall of ice he had built around his heart. These men had stood beside him through everything. They would stand beside him through this as well. "We leave at dawn," he said. "Tell no one our true destination." The Bloodstone Market squatted in a valley between territories like a festering wound. Aldric approached it on the 3rd day of travel, his merchant disguise doing little to mask the predatory tension in his shoulders. 12 guards spread out through the crowd, weapons concealed but ready. The market operated in full daylight, shameless in its brutality. Wooden cages lined the central plaza. Men and women huddled inside, some defiant, most broken. The air reeked of unwashed bodies and human misery. Aldric had seen slave markets before during border campaigns, but actually walking through one as a potential buyer made his wolf snarl with barely contained rage. "Steady," Gareth murmured from 2 paces behind. "We find them first. Then we can kill everyone." Aldric forced his breathing to slow. Control. Morrigan had always preached control, the ability to channel rage into precision rather than wild violence. He moved through the crowd with careful steps, scanning faces, searching for— There. A wooden platform stood at the market's center. A scarred man in expensive leather stood beside it, ledger in hand, the market master. Behind him, 5 women chained together in a line. They wore filthy rags that had once been clothes, their hair matted, faces bruised. But they stood tall, even in chains, even after whatever hell they had endured. That posture alone told Aldric they were warriors. He moved closer, pushing through buyers who haggled over human flesh as if discussing livestock. His enhanced senses picked up details. The way the second woman in line held her weight, combat-trained. The first woman's hands, calloused in patterns that came from years of sword work. The third woman's eyes, constantly scanning for threats and opportunities. Moonguard sentinels, he was certain of it. "Welcome, honored guests," the market master announced, his voice carrying across the plaza. Today we present exceptional merchandise, strong backs, fertile wombs, several with notable bloodlines. Aldric's hands clenched into fists. Beside him, Gareth's breathing had gone dangerously steady. That particular rhythm meant the old warrior was seconds from violence. "First lot," the master continued, gesturing to the 5 chained women. "Ages ranging from 19 to 30. We begin bidding at 10,000 gold for the group." Hands rose immediately. The bidding climbed quickly. 15,000, 18,000, 20,000 gold. Aldric studied each woman carefully. Their faces showed exhaustion and trauma, but underneath he saw something unbroken. Warriors recognizing their moment had not yet come, waiting for an opening, ready to fight when the odds improved. 22,000, a voice called from the back. A massive man with a shaved head and tribal scarring pushed forward. Aldric recognized the style. Shadowfen territory. "And I want that one specifically." The man pointed directly at the second woman in line, the one whose posture screamed military training. "Ah, Torvin," the market master said with obvious pleasure. "I thought you might be interested. This female has fire, killed 3 of my men during capture." "Good," Torvin rumbled. "I prefer them with spirit, makes the breaking more satisfying." Something cold and terrible moved through Aldric's veins. His wolf surged forward, demanding blood. He forced it down through sheer will, but barely. Not yet. Not until he was certain. 22,000 for the lot, the master called. "Do I hear 25? Silence. Aldric needed to see their wrists, needed to confirm what he suspected. The Moonguard sentinels wore tattoos, crescent moons crossed by silver swords, marking them as Morrigan's chosen warriors. If these women bore those marks, going once, he could not let them fall into Torvin's hands, could not let any of them be sold. But revealing himself too early risked alerting whoever had orchestrated this operation. Strategy warred with instinct in his mind. Going twice. The second woman in line shifted slightly. Sweat ran down her arms despite the cool morning air, and where it touched her left wrist, the black paste that had been carefully applied began to dissolve. A crescent moon emerged from beneath the covering, the distinctive shape unmistakable even at 20 feet, and beneath it, elegant script that made Aldric's heart stop. Morrigan's chosen. The world narrowed to that single detail. His mate had marked certain warriors with her personal inscription. The finest of the sentinels, the women she trusted most to carry forward her legacy. Aldric had stood beside Morrigan during one such marking ceremony, had watched her carefully tattoo those words with her own hand. This woman had been chosen, which meant all 5 probably had been. And if 5 of Morrigan's personally selected warriors were here, how many more had been captured? How many more were being sold across how many markets? The rage that swept through him then was not the hot fury of combat. It was cold, calculated, the kind of anger that planned massacres with tactical precision. Going 3, Aldric pushed back his hood, let his full alpha presence bloom outward like a shockwave. Every shifter in the market felt it immediately, that overwhelming pressure that made wolves instinctively bare their throats in submission. Conversations died, buyers stepped back. The market master's voice caught in his throat. Aldric walked forward through the suddenly silent crowd. His boots struck stone with deliberate rhythm. No hurry, no hesitation, just inexorable advance toward the platform. The market master's face cycled through recognition and terror in rapid succession. Everyone in 5 territories knew King Aldric Silvercrest. His reputation for ruthlessness was well earned. "Your Majesty," the man stammered, "we are honored by your presence, but the sale is concluded. Torvin has won the bid fairly under market rules." "No." The single word came out layered with alpha command, the tone that made submission mandatory rather than optional. "Release her, now. The rules of the market do not apply to me." Aldric reached the platform and climbed the wooden steps with fluid grace. Power radiated from him in waves that made every wolf present want to simultaneously submit and flee. "I am Alpha King of these lands and all lands within 500 miles. Your market operates at my sufferance. Do you wish to test whether that sufferance continues?" The threat hung heavy in the air. The market master looked to his guards, but they refused to meet his eyes. No one challenged an Alpha King, not without armies at their back. Torvin, however, stepped forward. The massive man had enough arrogance or stupidity to try. With respect, Your Majesty, I have purchased these females legally. You cannot simply— Aldric moved faster than human eyes could track. One moment he stood several feet away. The next, his hand wrapped around Torvin's throat, lifting the larger man off the ground as if he weighed nothing. I can do whatever I wish, Aldric said quietly, his voice more terrifying for its calmness. And what I wish is for you to leave, now, unless you would prefer I demonstrate why challenging an Alpha King is unwise. He released Torvin, who stumbled backward, gasping. The man looked at the chained women with furious, hungry eyes, but he was not completely stupid. He knew when he was outmatched. Aldric turned to the market master. Keys, for all of them. All, Your Majesty. I have only these 5 on the platform currently. All the Moonguard sentinels. Aldric's voice dropped to a growl. I can smell their particular scent from here. You have 7 of my warriors in these cages. Release them immediately, or I start killing slavers. The master's face went white as sun-bleached bone. He fumbled for keys at his belt, nearly dropping them in his haste. Of course, Your Majesty, of course. I had no idea they were royal property. The marking was covered. If I had known— You knew exactly what they were, Aldric said flatly. That is why you covered their marks. Release them, or die where you stand. Guards scrambled to unlock chains. Aldric watched as the 5 women on the platform were freed first. Silver manacles fell away, leaving red welts on their wrists. The women's postures changed immediately, no longer captive prey, but predators testing their range of motion. The second woman, the one Torvin had wanted, met Aldric's eyes directly. Gray eyes that held no fear despite everything she had endured. She was 26 or 27, with dark hair pulled back in a warrior's braid, and a face that would have been beautiful if not for the purple bruising along one cheekbone. But it was her bearing that captured attention. The way she held herself despite days of captivity and degradation. Aldric approached her directly, ignoring protocol and propriety. He reached for her wrist, his touch surprisingly gentle, as he wiped away the remaining black paste. The full tattoo emerged beneath his fingers, the crescent moon, the silver sword, and in Morrigan's elegant script, Morrigan's Chosen, with the name Rhea Blackthorn inscribed below. His jaw clenched. A muscle ticked in his cheek. When he spoke, his voice came out rough with barely suppressed emotion. You were one of hers. It was not a question, but the woman answered anyway. Yes, my king. How long have you been here? 3 days. His eyes closed briefly, absorbing the blow. 3 days. She had been in this hell for 72 hours while he sat in his castle, blind to the suffering of women his mate had loved, women he should have protected. When his eyes opened again, they burned with cold fury. He turned to face the crowd, his voice rising to carry across the entire market. Let it be known, the Moonguard sentinels are under my protection. Any who harm them, trade them, or hold them captive will answer to me personally. I will find you, I will hunt you, and I will make you pray for death long before I grant it. Silence. Then chaos erupted. Buyers fled. Merchants scrambled to distance themselves from the market's operations. The master himself had vanished, likely already running for whatever hole he could hide in. Aldric's guards, who had remained hidden until needed, emerged to secure the area. Gareth and Thaddeus moved through the cages systematically, releasing the 6 other sentinels and providing them with cloaks to cover their torn clothing. Marcus appeared at Aldric's shoulder. We should move quickly, Your Majesty. Local warlords will not appreciate you disrupting their economy. This place will be ash by nightfall, Aldric said flatly. Make it so. With pleasure. Aldric returned his attention to the woman before him. Rhea. He knew that name. Morrigan had spoken of her in those final days. The orphan girl she had found on the streets, half-starved and wholly feral. The warrior she had personally trained. The fighter she had marked as special during a ceremony 5 years ago. Can you walk? He asked. Yes. Good. We leave immediately. He paused, his gaze softening slightly. I am sorry for what happened to you, to all of you. Rhea met his eyes steadily. Save your apologies, Your Majesty. Just get us home. Something that might have been respect flickered across his features. Morrigan had chosen well when she trained this one. As you command, warrior. He offered her his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Rhea took it. Together they descended from the platform where she had nearly been sold to the highest bidder. Behind them, the Bloodstone market began to burn. The journey to Shadow Peak Castle stretched across 5 days of mountain roads and forest paths. Aldric had expected to manage forced marches and minimal rest, the efficient military transport of rescued prisoners. Instead, he found himself providing 7 horses, warm cloaks, and supplies that would have suited honored guests rather than traumatized survivors. Gareth had raised an eyebrow at the orders but said nothing. Thaddeus openly approved, personally selecting the gentlest horses for warriors who had not ridden in months. Marcus coordinated the logistics with his usual precision. Rhea rode at Aldric's right hand. The positioning was deliberate, though he had not fully examined his reasoning. Something about her presence felt necessary, like the weight of a sword at his hip. Natural, expected. The 7 rescued sentinels followed in pairs, with royal guards bringing up the rear. The guards were respectful, professional, treating the women as warriors rather than victims. Aldric appreciated that more than he could express. These women deserved dignity. The first day passed in near silence. The rescued sentinels were too exhausted, too traumatized for conversation beyond necessities. Aldric did not push. He knew enough about recovery from hell to understand that words would come when ready. That evening, they made camp in a clearing that offered good sightlines in all directions. Aldric set watch rotations with military precision, ensuring guards remained alert but not intrusive. He wanted the women to feel safe, not monitored. Rhea sat apart from the main group, her back against a fallen log, staring into the fire. Aldric found himself drawn to her position, settling onto the log several feet away. Close enough for conversation, far enough to avoid pressure. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled. Night insects sang their endless songs. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hunted. "You fight well," Aldric said finally. "The market master said you killed 3 men during capture." "I killed 3, disabled 5 more." Rhea's voice held no pride, only factual reporting. "But there were 12 total, numbers told in the end. 12 experienced fighters to bring down 1 warrior. That speaks to considerable skill. Morrigan trained us well." Pain flickered across her face at the name. "She made us believe we could survive anything, stand against any odds." She was right. Aldric studied the woman beside him. "You survived. You protected your sisters as much as possible. You waited for the right moment rather than spending your life in a futile gesture. That is exactly what she would have taught." Rhea turned to look at him directly, her gray eyes searching his face. "You loved her, with everything I was." The admission came easier than expected. "When she died, part of me died with her." "Only part?" The question held more weight than it should. Aldric met her gaze steadily. "I am still here, still breathing, still capable of rage on behalf of warriors I failed to protect. So yes, only part, though some days I wish it had been all." She would not have wanted that. No, she would have wanted me to be strong, to protect what she built, to honor her memory through action rather than grief. He looked back at the fire. "I have not been particularly successful." A dark-haired woman approached the fire before Rhea could respond. She moved with the hesitant steps of someone carrying visible guilt. When she settled near them, Aldric recognized the signs of someone preparing confession. "My name is Bryn Ashford," the woman said quietly. "I am the one who sent the message that led to Rhea's capture." Rhea's posture did not change, but something hardened in her expression. "They took my brother," Bryn continued, words spilling out in a rush. "Said they would kill him unless I lured you to Thornwood. I thought they only wanted you, Rhea. I did not realize it was part of something larger. When I saw you in that cage, when I realized what I had helped create." "Where is your brother now?" Aldric asked before Rhea could respond. "I do not know. They claimed to be holding him, but I never saw proof. It could have been a lie." "When we return to the capital," Aldric said firmly, "we will investigate. If he lives, we will locate him. If he is dead, we will make those responsible pay." Bryn's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I do not deserve mercy." "You deserve truth," Rhea corrected. "They used you, used your love for family as a weapon. That does not make you guilty of their crimes." Other sentinels had drifted closer, drawn by the conversation. A young blonde woman, barely into her 20s, an auburn-haired fighter with sharp features. All of them bore the marks of recent trauma, but underneath Aldric saw the warriors Morrigan had forged. "Did anyone else notice the pattern?" the blonde asked. Her voice still carried a hollow quality. "Of where we were taken?" "What pattern?" Aldric leaned forward, tactical mind engaging. "I was captured near Thornwood," the blonde continued. Ilara Nightshade was in the region 3 days before my disappearance. She claimed to be visiting family. Ice formed in Aldric's chest. What is your name, warrior? Lyra Windrunner, your majesty. And you? He turned to the auburn-haired woman. Where were you taken? Eastern border. My name is Kenna Redmayne. She met his eyes with the confidence of someone who had commanded others. Ilara had passed through conducting inspections, or so she said. Bryn. Aldric's voice had gone dangerously soft. Where were you when they took you? The southern farms, near the vineyards. Realization was dawning on Bryn's face. Ilara had been there 2 weeks prior, arranging wine supplies for the castle. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Every warrior captured from a location Ilara had recently visited. The pattern Marcus had identified extended beyond simple correlation. This was coordination, planning, systematic hunting of Morrigan's finest warriors. We need to speak with the king, Rhea said, already rising. You are speaking with him, Aldric replied. But he understood her meaning. This was not campfire conversation. This was intelligence that could reshape everything. They moved to Aldric's tent, set slightly apart for the privacy kingship required. Guards stood watch outside, but knew better than to eavesdrop. Inside, Aldric lit a single lamp and spread maps across his traveling desk. Show me, he said. Rhea pointed to locations. Thornwood, Eastern Border, Southern Farms, the old tavern where she had been ambushed. One by one, the sites appeared on the map, and one by one, Aldric marked them with red ink. When finished, the pattern was undeniable. A spiderweb with Ilara at its center. She was scouting, Rhea said, her voice tight with controlled fury. Finding isolated warriors, identifying their routines, reporting back to whoever was organizing the captures. Alpha Theron Darkwater, Aldric supplied grimly. Of Shadowfen territory. Marcus discovered that Ilara made 3 extended visits to his lands over the past 3 years. The stated purpose was trade negotiations, but those negotiations never resulted in agreements. She was meeting with him, planning. Rhea studied the map with a tactical eye. How many warriors disappeared total? 8 confirmed, but if they were selling you at one market... Aldric did not finish the sentence, did not need to. There could be dozens more across multiple markets, all of us systematically hunted and sold. Rhea's hands clenched into fists. Ilara stood at Morrigan's funeral, wept as the pyre burned, then she orchestrated the destruction of everything Morrigan built. We need more than travel records, Aldric said. We need proof of communication between Ilara and Theron. Letters, witnesses, something concrete that will stand before a council. Morrigan kept detailed records, personal correspondence, daily observations. Rhea met his eyes. If she suspected treachery, she would have documented it. Her chambers have been sealed since her death. I ordered them preserved exactly as she left them. Aldric's throat tightened at the memory. I could not bear to disturb anything. It felt like erasing her. Then perhaps it is time to honor her by discovering what she tried to tell us. The wisdom in those words struck deep. Aldric had been so focused on preserving Morrigan's memory that he had missed the messages she left behind. The warnings about shadows in the castle, the careful documentation of her suspicions, all of it waiting to be found. When we reach Shadow Peak, he said quietly, you will have full access to her chambers. Find what she wanted us to know. The remaining days of travel passed in careful observation and quiet conversations. Aldric found himself watching Rhea more than he should. The way she moved through camp, checking on her sisters despite her own exhaustion. How she spoke to the younger warriors, offering encouragement without false promises. The tactical discussions she had with Kenna about defensive positions and supply logistics. She was a natural leader. He wondered if she recognized it in herself. On the 4th night, Aldric stood watch despite protests from his captains. Sleep continued to evade him regardless, and pacing camp felt more productive than lying awake in his tent. He found a position overlooking the path they would travel the next day, letting his enhanced senses expand into the darkness. Footsteps approached from behind. He recognized Rhea's scent before she spoke. You should rest, she said, settling onto a boulder beside his position. Tomorrow will be demanding. So will every day after that. Rest can wait. That is what Morrigan used to say, right before she collapsed from exhaustion during training. Rhea's voice held gentle rebuke. She taught us to push limits, but she also taught us that broken tools serve no one. I am not broken. No, but you are fracturing. I can see it. Your captains can see it. Probably every person in your kingdom can see it." She paused. "Grief does not make you weak, Your Majesty. Pretending it does not exist, however, will destroy you." Aldric wanted to argue, wanted to explain that an Alpha King could not afford the luxury of visible weakness, but something in Rhea's steady gaze made the protests die unspoken. "She tried to warn me," he said instead, "about shadows in the castle, about not trusting everyone. I thought she was delirious from illness. I dismissed the words of the woman I loved because I was so certain I knew better. You could not have known. Neither could I." Rhea's voice carried its own weight of guilt. "She called me to her chambers 3 weeks before she died, made me promise to protect the sisterhood if anything happened. I thought she was being dramatic. Morrigan always had a flair for the theatrical." A surprised laugh escaped Aldric. "She did she not? I once watched her turn a minor border dispute into a 3-act tragedy complete with speeches about honor and destiny. She made us memorize poetry, said warriors who could not appreciate beauty would become monsters." Rhea smiled at the memory. "We hated it at the time. Now I understand what she meant." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Aldric found himself acutely aware of Rhea's presence beside him, the warmth radiating from her body despite the night chill, the steady rhythm of her breathing. How close they sat, shoulders nearly touching. It had been 18 months since he felt anything resembling connection with another person. Since he allowed himself to notice details beyond tactical necessity, the realization was both terrifying and strangely welcome. "Why did you come to the market yourself?" Rhea asked suddenly. "You are the Alpha King. You could have sent your captains." "Because they were Morrigan's warriors. Because I failed to protect them when she was alive. Because—" He paused, searching for words. "Because some things require personal attention. Some debts can only be paid by the one who owes them. You did not owe us anything. I owe Morrigan everything, which means I owe the women she loved the same loyalty she would have given." Aldric turned to face Rhea directly. "You were her chosen. I saw it written on your wrist. She marked you as special. I intend to understand why." Something flickered in Rhea's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition of a challenge accepted. "Then I suppose we will be spending considerable time together," she said. "I suppose we will." The moment stretched between them, weighted with implications neither fully understood. Then reality crashed back. Tomorrow they would reach Shadow Peak. Tomorrow the real investigation would begin. Tomorrow they would search for evidence that could prove Morrigan had been murdered by her closest friend. "Get some rest," Aldric said, his voice gentler than intended. "I will keep watch. Wake me in 3 hours for second watch. I am the king. I decide when I sleep. And I am the woman who will drag you back to your tent if necessary." Rhea stood, stretching muscles stiff from days of riding. "Morrigan chose me for stubbornness as much as skill. Do not test whether I inherited her ability to manage difficult men." Aldric found himself smiling despite everything. "You are very much like her, stubborn, unwilling to show weakness even when exhausted." "I am not Morrigan." "No, you are yourself, but you carry her legacy forward in how you move, how you think. She would be proud of what you have become." The word struck deeper than Aldric intended. He saw emotion flicker across Rhea's face before she controlled it. When she spoke again, her voice was rough. "I hope you are right, because if we are about to uncover what I think we will find, that legacy is all we have left of her." She left before he could respond. Aldric watched her return to camp, her silhouette disappearing among the tents. Something had shifted between them during this conversation. An understanding, perhaps, or the foundation of trust that came from shared purpose. He thought about Morrigan, about the mate he had loved with absolute devotion, and for the first time since her death, he did not feel crushing guilt when thinking about the future, about the possibility that life might hold more than grief and duty. The thought both comforted and terrified him. Shadow Peak Castle rose from the mountains like a natural extension of the rock itself. Gray walls merged with stone, creating the illusion that the fortress had always existed, would always exist, eternal as the peaks themselves. Aldric felt something ease in his chest at the sight. Home. Despite the darkness that waited inside those walls, they entered through the main gates as the sun set, painting the courtyard in shades of crimson and gold. People gathered to stare, word having spread that the king returned with rescued warriors. Aldric saw recognition on many faces, saw shock and relief. And standing at the top of the castle steps, her red hair catching the last rays of sunlight, stood Alara Nightshade. Aldric watched her face carefully as she took in the 7 women on horseback. Her green eyes widened, surprise, confusion, and for just a heartbeat, something that looked like fear. Then her expression smoothed into careful neutrality, the mask of a woman who had survived court politics for 15 years through perfect control. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Welcome home. We received your messages. Rooms have been prepared for our returned warriors." "Alara," Aldric's tone gave nothing away. "We have much to discuss. Attend me in my study in 1 hour." "Of course, Your Majesty." Aldric dismounted, then moved to help Rhea down. Their hands touched briefly as she accepted his assistance, and he felt the bond between them pulse. Not a mate bond, not yet, but something. A connection forged through shared purpose and mutual respect. Rhea met his eyes for a moment that stretched too long. Then she turned to her sisters, already shifting into command mode, organizing their group with quiet efficiency. Aldric climbed the castle steps past Alara, did not look at her, did not trust himself to maintain composure if he saw her face. Because now that he knew to look for it, the guilt was obvious, the fear poorly masked, the calculation of a woman whose carefully laid plans had just collapsed. In his private study, Aldric found Marcus waiting with files spread across every available surface. Travel records, supply requisitions, communication logs, 3 years of documentation compiled in 72 hours. "You work quickly," Aldric said. "When motivated by righteous fury, efficiency improves." Marcus gestured to a specific stack. "These are particularly damning. Alara requisitioned a rare herb 3 years ago. When cross-referenced with botanical texts, it matches ingredients for an untraceable poison, one that mimics wasting disease. Mimics wasting disease and attacks the bond between human and wolf," Aldric finished. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. Morrigan's symptoms. Precisely. Marcus pulled another document. And here, correspondence from Shadowfen merchants mentioning meetings with the red-haired advisor to discuss joint ventures in human capital. That is slave trader terminology, Your Majesty. Aldric forced himself to breathe, to think tactically rather than emotionally. This is circumstantial, damning but not absolute proof. No, which is why we need what Morrigan left behind. A knock sounded at the study door. Rhea entered without waiting for permission, her expression urgent. "Your Majesty, I need access to Morrigan's chambers, now." "Granted. Take whatever guards you require." "I do not need guards. I need privacy." She moved to the desk, spreading her own map beside Marcus's documents. If Morrigan documented her suspicions, she would have hidden the evidence somewhere only the right person would find. "And you believe you are that person?" "She marked me as chosen, gave me a blessing 5 years ago that I still do not fully understand. Yes, I believe she prepared this for me." Rhea met his eyes. "Let me honor her by discovering what she wanted us to know." Aldric nodded slowly. Something about this moment felt significant beyond its immediate implications, a passing of responsibility from one Luna to her chosen successor, from his mate to the woman who might... He pushed the thought away, too soon, too complicated. "Take this," he said, pulling a key from the chain around his neck. "It opens her private chambers. No one has entered since her death." Rhea accepted the key with reverent care. "Thank you." She left quickly, purpose driving her steps. Aldric watched her go, then turned to Marcus. "How long until Alara arrives?" 20 minutes, assuming she uses the full hour." "Good. That gives us time to prepare questions she will not want to answer." They worked in focused silence, building an interrogation strategy based on evidence they could prove and implications they could suggest. When Alara finally arrived, precisely 1 hour after being summoned, Aldric was ready. She entered with the confidence of someone who believed herself untouchable. 15 years at the right hand of power had taught her to move through political spaces with grace. "Your Majesty," she said with a slight bow, "I am relieved to see you return safely. When I heard about the Bloodstone market raid, I feared—" "Feared what?" Aldric's voice was dangerously soft. "That I would discover the truth about where Morrigan's warriors disappeared? That I would trace the conspiracy back to its source?" Alara's mask slipped fractionally. "I do not understand." "You visited every location where a sentinel vanished, within weeks of their captures." Marcus placed documents on the desk methodically. You requisitioned poison ingredients 3 years ago. You made multiple unexplained visits to Shadowfen territory. Those are all explainable. My duties require extensive travel. The herb was for medicinal purposes. The Shadowfen visits were trade negotiations. That produced no agreements, Aldric finished. Tell me, Alara, what were you really negotiating? Before she could answer, the study door burst open. Rhea stood in the entrance, holding a bundle wrapped in cloth. Her face was pale, her hands shaking slightly. Your Majesty, she said, you need to see this, now. Aldric moved to her side immediately. What did you find? Rhea unwrapped the bundle with careful precision. Inside lay 3 items that would change everything. A sealed vial containing dark residue, a stack of letters bound with black ribbon, and a leather pouch filled with gold coins bearing the crest of Shadowfen. She opened the vial first. The residue had a faintly sweet smell that made Aldric's wolf recoil instinctively. Poison. This was proof of what had killed Morrigan. But the letters proved even more damning. Written in Alara's distinctive hand, they detailed 3 years of conspiracy. Communications with Alpha Theron outlined plans to eliminate Morrigan, dissolve the Moonguard Sentinels, and weaken the kingdom in preparation for invasion. Payment schedules, meeting locations, instructions for capturing specific warriors. Aldric read them all. His hands did not shake. His voice did not rise. He simply absorbed each word with the cold precision of a tactical mind processing battlefield intelligence. When he finished, he looked up at Alara, saw the calculation in her eyes as she weighed options, saw the moment she decided lies would no longer serve. Yes, she said simply. I poisoned Morrigan. I sold your warriors. I conspired with Theron. And you know what? I would do it all again, because she was weak, and weakness would have destroyed this kingdom. The confession hung in the air like drawn steel. Aldric felt his wolf surge forward, demanding blood, but he forced it down through sheer will. Not yet. First, they would extract every piece of information she possessed. Then justice would come. But as he looked between Alara's defiant expression and Rhea's steady presence at his side, Aldric understood that everything had changed. The investigation was over. The war was just beginning. The throne room of Shadowpeak Castle had witnessed coronations and executions, treaties and declarations of war. Its vaulted ceiling stretched 3 stories high, supported by columns carved from single pieces of mountain granite. Tapestries depicting 5 generations of Silvercrest rule hung between the columns, their colors still vibrant despite decades of exposure to torch smoke and time. Aldric sat on the throne his grandfather had commissioned, feeling the weight of that lineage pressing down on his shoulders. To his right stood Captain Gareth, face carved from stone in old anger. To his left, Captain Marcus held documents that would condemn a woman who had served the crown for 15 years. Behind them, Captain Thaddeus positioned himself where he could watch both the throne and the chamber's entrance. 5 counselors occupied their traditional positions along the chamber's eastern wall. Lord Harwick, corpulent and cautious. Lady Vera, shrewd and politically astute. Sir Brennan, a knight who valued honor above pragmatism. Master Torrin, who managed the kingdom's finances. And Dame Celeste, the only council member who had fought in actual battles. Alara Nightshade stood in the center of the chamber, silver chains binding her wrists. Royal guards flanked her position, hands on sword hilts. She wore the same elegant dress she had donned to welcome Aldric home, though now it seemed like costume. The clothing of someone pretending to be loyal. Rhea stood near the throne's base, close enough to be included in proceedings, but not so close as to presume authority she had not yet earned. The other 6 rescued sentinels lined the western wall, bearing witness to justice for their fallen Luna. Let the record show, Aldric began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, that we convene this emergency council to address charges of high treason, conspiracy, and murder against Alara Nightshade, former advisor to the crown. Lord Harwick shifted uncomfortably. Your Majesty, these are extraordinary accusations. Lady Alara has served faithfully for 15 years, Aldric finished. Yes, I am well aware of her service record. I am also aware that she poisoned my mate, sold royal warriors into slavery, and conspired with a foreign alpha to weaken this kingdom in preparation for invasion. He gestured to Marcus. Present the evidence. Marcus moved forward with careful precision, placing documents on a table positioned for council viewing. Travel records showing Lady Alara visited every location where a Moonguard sentinel disappeared within weeks of their captures. Requisition orders for rare herbs that, when combined, create an untraceable poison mimicking wasting disease. Communications from Shadowfen merchants referencing meetings with the red-haired advisor to discuss human capital ventures. All circumstantial, Alara said calmly. I traveled extensively because my duties required it. I ordered medicinal supplies. I cannot control what merchants claim about meetings that may or may not have occurred. And these? Rhea stepped forward, holding the letters bound in black ribbon. Written in your hand, detailing 3 years of conspiracy with Alpha Theron, payment schedules, meeting locations, specific instructions for capturing warriors by name. She read aloud from one letter, her voice steady despite the rage Aldric could sense beneath her control. The Luna suspects. She has been testing her food, growing paranoid. I have increased the dosage. She will be dead within weeks. Once she is gone, I will present the forged dissolution order. Silence crashed through the chamber. Even Lord Harwick had no counter-argument for words written in Alara's distinctive script. You forged Morrigan's final command? Dame Celeste's voice cracked like a whip. You made us believe our Luna ordered the destruction of everything she built? I did what was necessary, Alara replied, and for the first time her composure cracked, not into fear or regret, but into something fiercer. Conviction. You want to know the truth? Fine. I poisoned Morrigan. I sold your precious warriors. I gave Theron exactly what he wanted in exchange for alliance, and I would do it all again. The chamber erupted. Counselors shouted questions. Guards reached for weapons. The sentinels along the western wall surged forward before Rhea's sharp gesture stopped them. Aldric raised one hand. The Alpha command in that simple motion silenced every voice. When he spoke, his words emerged cold and precise as a blade between ribs. Explain. Gladly. Alara lifted her chin, chains rattling with the movement. Morrigan was weak, compassionate to the point of stupidity. She refused to conquer neighboring territories when we had the strength. She wasted resources on sisterhood and training programs instead of expanding our borders. She believed in fairness and justice and all those pretty ideals that get kingdoms destroyed. Those ideals built something worth protecting, Aldric said quietly. Those ideals would have gotten us invaded within a decade. Alara's green eyes blazed with the fervor of someone who genuinely believed their cause righteous. I loved Morrigan once, stood beside her for 15 years, watched her make decision after decision that prioritized individual warriors over strategic advantage, and I realized that if I did nothing, everything I had helped build would crumble. So you murdered her. Thaddeus's voice carried the weight of personal betrayal. He had trained beside Morrigan for years, considered her a friend. I saved this kingdom from her weakness. Theron and I, together, would have created an empire spanning 3 territories. Our combined forces would have been unstoppable. The Moonguard Sentinels were impressive warriors, yes, but they were also loyal to Morrigan's vision rather than practical reality, so I removed them from the equation. You sold them as breeding stock, Rhea said flatly. 83 warriors. You identified the strongest, most dangerous, and handed them to slavers. I identified the ones most likely to investigate or ask uncomfortable questions, the ones who might trace the conspiracy back to its source. Alara's smile held no warmth. Theron's men captured them. The markets paid well. Everyone profited except those who clung to outdated notions of honor. Aldric felt his wolf surge forward, demanding her blood. The throne room swam red at the edges of his vision. Gareth's hand landed on his shoulder, grounding him through the bond they shared as Alpha and senior captain. Control, Gareth murmured, too quiet for others to hear. She wants you to lose control, prove her right about weakness. The words steadied him. Aldric forced his breathing to slow, channeling rage into cold calculation. Alara expected him to kill her in fury, to prove that emotion overruled judgment. He would not give her that satisfaction. You called Morrigan weak, he said instead. You who spent 15 years in her shadow, doing work you claim went unrecognized. Tell me, Alara, if you were so much smarter, so much stronger, why did you never challenge her directly? Why poison instead of honorable combat? Something flickered in Alara's expression, the first crack in her certainty. Because the pack would never have accepted me. They loved her, worshipped her even. I could have defeated her in single combat, proven my superior strength, and they would have called it murder, condemned me for removing their precious Luna. Bitterness dripped from every word. So yes, I used poison. I used deception. I did what was necessary because direct methods were denied to me by a system that valued sentiment over capability. You are right about one thing, Dame Celeste said from her position along the wall. The pack would never have accepted you. Not because of sentiment, but because you fundamentally misunderstand what makes a good leader. Morrigan built loyalty through trust and sacrifice. You built nothing but a conspiracy that required the murder of someone who called you sister. Alara's laugh was ugly. Sister. She called me sister while taking all the glory for plans I developed. She stood on platforms accepting praise for diplomatic solutions I negotiated. She was Luna, and I was merely her second, forever in shadow, forever invisible. For the first time, Aldric saw the true wound beneath Alara's justifications. 15 years of jealousy, of watching someone else receive recognition for shared work, of being the brilliant mind behind a beloved face. It did not excuse her actions, but it explained them, made her human rather than simply monstrous. I understand, he said quietly. Alara's eyes widened with surprise. You felt overlooked, undervalued. You believed your contributions went unrecognized while Morrigan received adoration you thought you deserved. Aldric leaned forward slightly. But here is what you fail to grasp. Leadership is not about who has the best tactics or the most ruthless strategies. It is about inspiring people to follow you into darkness because they trust you will lead them back to light. Morrigan had that gift. You never did. Because I was never given the chance. You were given 15 years of chances, 15 years to build relationships, earn trust, demonstrate the kind of leadership that makes warriors willing to die for you. He gestured to Rhea and the Sentinels. These women survived slavery, torture, degradation that would break most people, and they still stand tall because Morrigan taught them something you will never understand. That strength is not about refusing to yield to enemies. It is about refusing to yield to the darkness inside yourself. Silence settled over the chamber. Even Alara seemed momentarily without response. You will stand trial, Aldric continued. A proper trial before the full council, with opportunity to present defense. But understand this, the evidence against you is overwhelming. The confession you just gave was witnessed by 15 people. Your fate is sealed. Then why bother with trial? Alara asked bitterly. Because unlike you, I believe in the ideals Morrigan fought for. Justice rather than expedience. Due process rather than summary execution. Aldric rose from the throne. Take her to the dungeons. Silver chains. Constant watch. If she escapes, the guards responsible will join her in cells. 4 guards moved to comply, but Alara had one final card to play. You think you have won? She laughed as they began leading her toward the exit. You have evidence of my crimes. Congratulations. But evidence will not stop what is coming. Theron has 2,000 soldiers. Your forces are scattered, weakened by months of searching for missing warriors. The Moonguard Sentinels are still broken, no matter how many you rescued from one market. She paused at the threshold, green eyes finding Aldric's. The attack comes at midnight, at the start of the 3rd day from now, when darkness falls and your defenses are unprepared, and when he strikes, this kingdom falls. You can execute me, your majesty, but you cannot save Shadow Peak. The door closed behind her, leaving those words hanging in the air like a death sentence. Marcus was first to break the silence. Is she lying? Trying to create panic? No. Aldric returned to studying maps already spread across the war table. She is telling truth, or what she believes to be truth. Theron would not launch conspiracy of this scale without military follow-through. Midnight at the start of the 3rd day. Gareth joined him at the table. That gives us approximately 70 hours. Our full strength is spread across 3 garrisons. Recalling them requires minimum 2 days, and that is pushing horses to their limits. We have perhaps 800 soldiers stationed here at Shadow Peak, Thaddeus added grimly. Against 2,000 experienced warriors from Shadowfen, those are poor odds. Rhea moved to the table, her tactical mind already working through possibilities. You have more than 800 soldiers. You have 34 sentinels ready to fight. And if we send word immediately to the warriors who dispersed after the dissolution, how many could reach us in 70 hours? Sending messages, waiting for responses, coordinating return journeys? Marcus calculated quickly. Perhaps another 40, maybe 50 if we are fortunate. That gives us roughly 900 defenders against 2,000 attackers. Still poor odds. Better than 800 against 2,000. Rhea placed her hands on the table, leaning over maps with the confidence of someone who had studied defensive tactics for years. And we have advantages Theron does not expect. He believes the Sentinels remain scattered and broken. He does not know we have discovered Alara's treachery. He thinks his invasion will catch us completely unprepared. She is right, Dame Celeste said. Surprise is a weapon that cuts both ways. If we can turn his assumptions against him, we know this castle better than any outsiders. Lyra, the young blonde sentinel, stepped forward. We know its defenses, its weak points, its hidden passages. 34 trained warriors can hold choke points that would require hundreds of regular soldiers. And we fight for something Theron's mercenaries do not, Kenna added, her auburn hair catching torchlight. We fight for our home, for justice, for Morrigan's memory. That gives us strength no amount of gold can buy. Aldric studied the 4 women standing around his war table. Rhea, with her tactical brilliance and unbreakable spirit. Lyra, who had survived trauma that would have destroyed someone weaker. Kenna, whose organizational mind saw patterns and solutions others missed. Bryn, who carried guilt but transformed it into determination. Morrigan had trained them well, better than he had realized. Rhea, he said, decision crystallizing in his mind. I am reinstating the Moonguard Sentinels effective immediately, full authority, full resources. Her gray eyes widened slightly. Your Majesty, you are promoted to general with command over all female warriors in my service. Recruit, train, coordinate. Use whatever you need. You have 70 hours to transform scattered survivors into a fighting force. That is not enough time to... You will make it enough. Aldric's voice carried absolute conviction. You were right about everything. Alara, the conspiracy, the threat we face. You pieced together truth from fragments when everyone else remained blind. Morrigan chose wisely when she marked you as special. I will not make the mistake of underestimating you as others have. Rhea straightened, and Aldric saw the exact moment she accepted the weight of command. Saw her transform from rescued warrior to the leader Morrigan had always known she would become. I will not fail you, she said. I know. Something passed between them then. A recognition that went beyond military hierarchy or tactical necessity. Because you are you, strong where others break, determined where others surrender. Their eyes held for a moment that stretched too long, weighted with implications neither was ready to examine. Then reality crashed back. 70 hours, Rhea said. We have that long to turn scattered warriors into coordinated defense, to transform poor odds into possible victory. Then we should stop wasting time. Aldric turned to his captains. Gareth, send riders to every former sentinel you can locate. Use my personal seal. Tell them their Luna was murdered and her killer has confessed. Tell them we fight at midnight in 3 days to defend everything Morrigan built. And if they do not come, Gareth asked, they will come, because they are warriors, and warriors do not abandon their sisters when battle calls. The following hours blurred into focused activity. Messengers rode hard through the night, carrying word to scattered sentinels across 5 territories. Marcus coordinated intelligence gathering, sending scouts to confirm Theron's movements and troop positions. Thaddeus began inventory of weapons and armor, ensuring every defender would have proper equipment. Aldric found himself in the dungeons as midnight bells tolled. The passage down was narrow, carved from living rock, lit by torches that cast dancing shadows on damp walls. 2 guards stood watch outside Alara's cell, both veterans Gareth had personally selected for loyalty. Leave us, Aldric commanded, but remain within earshot. The guards retreated up the corridor, close enough to respond if needed, but far enough to grant illusion of privacy. Aldric approached the silver bars that caged the woman who had murdered his mate. Alara sat on a stone bench, chains binding her wrists and ankles. The silver had already burned angry welts into her skin, suppressing her wolf and leaving her trapped in human form. She looked up as he entered, and something like resignation crossed her face. Come to gloat? She asked. How noble of you. I came for information. Theron's invasion begins at midnight in 3 days. You will tell me his strategy, his troop placement, his weaknesses. Will I? Alara laughed, though the sound came out strained. And what makes you think I would betray my ally? Because he left you to face justice alone. Because he did not attempt rescue when we arrested you. Because you are worth nothing to him now except as a distraction." Aldric moved closer, his voice dropping to deadly quiet. "He used you, Alara, just as you used others. Now you will die in these chains while he conquers the kingdom you helped him invade. Unless you give me information that proves useful." Something flickered in Alara's expression. Fear, perhaps, or the dawning realization that her carefully laid plans had crumbled to dust. "What would I receive in exchange for cooperation? A cleaner death than you deserve. Execution by sword instead of public hanging. Your body returned to your family for proper burial rather than thrown in an unmarked grave. Such generous mercy. It is more than you gave Morrigan. She suffered for weeks while you watched her die, pretending concern." Aldric's wolf stirred, demanding violence. "Tell me about Theron's strategy." Alara was silent for a long moment, weighing options and outcomes. Finally she sighed, shoulders sagging in defeat. "He attacks at midnight at the start of the third day. 2,000 soldiers divided into 3 forces. The main army strikes the southern gates while smaller contingents target the eastern and western walls simultaneously. He expects to breach defenses within hours." "What weaponry?" "Standard siege equipment, battering rams, scaling ladders, archers, nothing exotic. Theron relies on overwhelming numbers rather than innovation." "His commanders?" 4 captains lead the divisions. I only met 2 personally. Gavril commands the southern force. Ruthless but predictable. He favors direct assault over subtlety. The others I never learned. Aldric absorbed the information, weighing its usefulness. "What about supply lines? Where does his army stage before the attack?" "The Thornwood region, 3 miles south of your border. They have been gathering for weeks, disguised as merchant caravans and traveling bands. By tomorrow, all forces will be in position." "You planned this well." "I planned it perfectly. Your discovery of the evidence was the only variable I failed to anticipate." Alara's green eyes studied him with something resembling respect. "I underestimated your Rhea's persistence. Morrigan trained her better than I realized." "She trained all of them well. You simply chose to forget those lessons." "I chose power over sentiment. In another world, that choice would have made me a queen. In this world, it makes you a corpse." Aldric turned to leave. "Your information will be verified. If accurate, you will receive the mercy promised. If you lied, your death will take days rather than minutes." "Aldric!" His name stopped him at the cell entrance. Alara had not called him by name, without title, since Morrigan's death. "For what it is worth, I did admire her once, before the envy consumed everything else. She deserved better than what I gave her." "Yes," Aldric said quietly, "she did." He left without looking back, climbing stairs that felt steeper than they had on descent. The weight of impending battle pressed down on him, but underneath he felt something unexpected. Clarity. Purpose. For 18 months he had drifted through grief, performing duties without passion. Now he had a war to fight, warriors to protect, a kingdom to defend, and a woman who made him believe the future might hold more than duty and death. The thought of Rhea stayed with him as he made his way to Morrigan's memorial grove. The sacred space occupied the castle's eastern grounds, sheltered by ancient oak trees that predated the fortress itself. Morrigan's shrine stood at the center, a simple stone marker engraved with her name and the crescent moon symbol of the Sentinels. Aldric knelt before it, alone in darkness broken only by moonlight filtering through leaves. He had not visited since the funeral, had not been able to face the physical reminder of what he had lost. "I failed you," he said to the stone. "You tried to warn me about shadows in the castle, about Alara, and I thought you were delirious. I let your killer stand at my side, believing her grief genuine." The night offered no response beyond wind through branches. "These warriors you trained, they are extraordinary, Rhea especially. I see why you loved them, why you marked her as chosen." His voice roughened. "I feel something for her, something I did not think possible again. Is that betrayal, or would you understand?" For a moment, nothing. Then warmth touched his skin, subtle as breath. Silver light shimmered at the edges of vision, there and gone so quickly he might have imagined it. But his wolf recognized the sensation, Morrigan's presence, or the memory of it, offering what felt like permission. "I will protect what you built," Aldric promised. "The Sentinels will endure, and if I fall defending these walls, my last thought will be gratitude that I met you, that you showed me what love could be." He remained kneeling until the moon reached its peak, drawing strength from communion with memory. When finally he rose, something had shifted in his chest. The grief remained, would always remain, but it no longer felt crushing. Instead, it became foundation, solid ground from which to move forward. The training yard stretched behind the castle, a vast expanse of packed earth where warriors had drilled for generations. Rhea stood at its center as dawn broke, watching her sisters arrive in ones and twos. Some she recognized from before the dissolution. Others were strangers wearing the haunted look of recent rescue. By mid-morning, 43 warriors had answered the call. Combined with the 34 already at Shadow Peak, that gave them 77 Moonguard sentinels, 77 women who had survived impossible odds and refused to break. Rhea addressed them from a raised platform, her voice carrying across the yard without need for shouting. "You know why you are here. Our Luna was murdered by the woman she trusted most. That same woman sold 83 of our sisters into slavery. At midnight, 2 days from now, an army of 2,000 will attack this castle, believing us scattered and broken." She paused, letting the words settle. "They are wrong. We are not broken. We are not scattered. We are here, and we are ready to fight. Not just for this kingdom or this king, but for Morrigan's memory, for the sisters we have lost, for everything we have survived." 77 voices rose in response, a war cry that echoed off castle walls. Rhea spent the next hours organizing them into units based on skill and experience. Bryn took command of 15 sentinels assigned to the eastern wall. Lyra, despite her youth and trauma, accepted leadership of 16 warriors who would hold the west. Kenna coordinated supply lines and equipment distribution with ruthless efficiency. That left 46 warriors, including Rhea herself, to serve as mobile reserves. They would reinforce wherever the breach came, plugging gaps and turning near defeats into desperate victories. Aldric watched from the battlements, his 3 captains flanking him. "She moves well," Gareth observed. "Natural commander. Morrigan saw that in her years ago." "She does more than move well," Thaddeus countered. "She inspires. Watch their faces. They would follow her into hell itself." Marcus nodded agreement. "Promoting her was the right choice, Your Majesty. The warriors respond to her in ways they never would to a male commander, no matter how skilled." Aldric said nothing, but pride swelled in his chest. Rhea had transformed from rescued captive to general in 70 hours, and no one questioned her authority. That spoke to both her capability and Morrigan's training. As if sensing his attention, Rhea looked up toward the battlements. Their eyes met across the distance, and something passed between them. Recognition. Trust. The foundation of something that might, given time, become more. Then she returned to her warriors, and the moment passed. That evening, Aldric requested Rhea's presence in the training yard. She arrived as sunset painted the sky crimson and gold, finding him alone with 2 practice swords laid ready. "You asked to see me, Your Majesty? I want to learn the Eastern defensive sequence, the one Morrigan perfected." Aldric tossed her a sword. "You are the only one who can teach it properly." Rhea caught the blade reflexively, testing its weight. "This is tactical exchange then, nothing more." "What else would it be?" Something flickered in her expression. Amusement, perhaps. Of course, purely tactical. They began slowly, Rhea demonstrating each position while Aldric mirrored her movements. He was skilled, she realized quickly. His footwork was excellent, balance near perfect. He simply lacked the refinements that came from training under someone as masterful as Morrigan. "Shift your weight forward more," she instructed, moving to adjust his stance. The moment her hands touched his shoulders, awareness crackled between them. She could feel the heat of his skin through leather, could sense his wolf stirring in response to her proximity. She stepped back quickly. "Try the sequence again." Aldric complied, executing the moves with improved precision. They worked through the sequence 5 times, then 10, until he performed it flawlessly. "Better," Rhea said. "Morrigan would approve." "Would she?" Aldric lowered his sword, his gaze intense. "Or would she question why I ask you specifically for instruction when I have a dozen other warriors who could teach me? I do not presume to know what our Luna would think. But you do know. I can see it in how carefully you maintain distance between us, in how you refuse to meet my eyes for longer than necessary." He moved closer, voice dropping. "You think I dishonor her memory by wanting to be near you." The accusation stung because it contained truth. "Your mate died. Grief does not fade so quickly." "It does not fade at all. It merely changes shape." Aldric set down his practice sword. I loved Morrigan with everything I was. When she died, part of me died with her. I thought I would never feel anything beyond that emptiness again. Your Majesty, please do not— Then I saw you standing on that auction platform, chains burning your wrists, and something inside me roared to life, not because you reminded me of her, but because you are you, strong where she was gentle, fierce where she was diplomatic. He reached out, fingers brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. You are not Morrigan's replacement, Rhea. You are something entirely new, someone who makes me want to be more than just a grieving widower wearing a crown. Rhea's breath caught. Every instinct screamed at her to step away, to maintain the professional distance that duty demanded. But she had never been good at lying. I cannot say I feel nothing, she whispered, but wanting something does not make it right. No, it makes it human. His thumb traced her cheekbone, sending shivers down her spine. Or in our case, Wolf. Tell me to stop, Rhea. Tell me this is unwelcome, and I will never mention it again. She should preserve the boundaries between king and warrior, between grieving widower and woman who had loved his dead mate. Should remember that people would judge, would call her opportunistic or him disloyal. But standing there in the fading light, feeling the warmth of his touch, and the mate bond beginning to pulse between them despite neither having claimed the other, Rhea found she could not. I do not want you to stop, she admitted. Aldric smiled then, genuine warmth lighting his features for the first time since Morrigan's death. Before he could act on the permission, however, horns sounded from the southern watchtower. 3 long blasts, the signal for approaching army. They sprang apart, warriors first and everything else second. Aldric ran for the southern wall with Rhea matching his stride. Behind them, alarm bells began to ring, calling every defender to positions. They reached the battlements as full dark descended. Below, torchlight illuminated the forest edge. Hundreds of torches, thousands, forming a line that stretched across the entire southern approach. They come early, Aldric said, voice gone flat with tactical assessment. At night, when we expected midnight tomorrow. Rhea realized the truth in the same instant. Alara's information was deliberately wrong. She said midnight at the start of the 3rd day, but she meant tonight. She bought Theron one final advantage by making us expect an extra day of preparation. Aldric's voice carried across the battlements, cutting through rising panic. All forces to defensive positions, archers to the walls, infantry to the gates, sentinels to eastern and western choke points. This is not a drill. Warriors flooded into position with training honed efficiency. Rhea found her sisters gathering at their assigned locations. Bryn commanded the eastern wall with grim determination. Lyra held the west, fear transformed into focus. Kenna appeared at Rhea's shoulder, already coordinating the flow of arrows and weapons to defenders. The enemy reached the walls as midnight bells tolled. Scaling ladders crashed against stone. Battering rams pounded the southern gates. Arrows filled the air, black shafts blotting out starlight. The siege had begun, and in the chaos and violence that followed, Rhea understood with perfect clarity that everything would change before dawn. The kingdom would survive or fall. The sentinels would prove their worth or die trying. And whatever existed between her and Aldric would either be forged in fire or lost to the darkness of battle. 70 hours had become 0, and the war for Shadow Peak Castle had begun. The first enemy soldier to clear the eastern rampart died before his feet touched stone. Aldric's blade took him through the throat, a clean kill born from 30 years of combat experience. The body tumbled backward, knocking the ladder and 3 more climbers into the courtyard 20 feet below. But for every ladder knocked aside, 2 more crashed against the walls. Shadowfen warriors swarmed like ants, their numbers seemingly endless in the torchlit darkness. Aldric fought with the cold precision that had earned him reputation as one of the deadliest alphas in 5 territories. No wasted motion, no unnecessary risks, just efficient violence delivered with surgical accuracy. To his left, Gareth fought with the brutal economy of a man who had survived 40 battles. The old captain used his shield as much as his sword, battering enemies off balance before finishing them with quick thrusts. Blood slicked the battlements, making footing treacherous. "Southern gates are holding," Marcus reported, appearing at Aldric's shoulder between waves of attackers. "But the rams are taking their toll. Wood is starting to splinter." "How long?" Aldric decapitated a warrior foolish enough to charge him directly. 2 hours, maybe 3 if we are fortunate. Redirect half the eastern archers to support the gates. Slow their advance." Marcus nodded and disappeared to relay orders. The man moved through chaos like water through cracks, always finding the path of least resistance. It was what made him invaluable. Thaddeus appeared on the western wall, coordinating Lyra's sentinels with the precision of someone who had trained these warriors personally. The women fought with a ferocity that made even experienced soldiers step back. They had survived slavery and degradation. Enemy soldiers held no terror for women who had already endured the worst humanity could offer. Aldric caught glimpses of individual combats as he fought, Lyra's arrows finding throats with mechanical regularity. Kenna coordinating supplies, ensuring arrows and weapons flowed to defenders who needed them. Bryn on the eastern wall, her guilt transformed into fury as she cut down attackers with cold efficiency. And Rhea, always Rhea. She moved through battle like water and steel combined, her blade an extension of her body. Morrigan's training had created something exceptional, and Aldric found himself watching her even when tactical necessity demanded his attention elsewhere. Hours blurred into continuous violence. Aldric lost track of how many he killed. 10? 20? His arms burned with exhaustion. Blood slicked his sword grip, making every strike require conscious effort to maintain control. Around him, defenders began to tire. The relentless waves of attackers were designed to exhaust rather than overwhelm. Wear them down through attrition until collapse became inevitable. "They are rotating fresh troops to the front," Gareth observed during a brief lull. "We kill dozens and more appear. Theron is using numbers the way we would use tactics. Then we change the equation." Aldric studied the battlefield with tactical eye. "Send word to Rhea. Tell her to prepare the mobile reserves. When the southern gates breach, we implement the kill zone strategy." Gareth's expression turned grim. He knew what that meant, knew the cost, but he nodded and moved to relay orders. The southern gates finally cracked under relentless assault. Wood splintered with sounds like breaking bones. Metal bent. The barrier that had held enemies at bay for hours groaned its death cry and exploded inward. Enemy soldiers flooded through the gap, roaring victory. But Aldric had prepared for this moment, had planned it with the cold calculation that came from understanding sacrifice was sometimes necessary. "Fall back to second defensive line," he commanded, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Let them through. Collapse the tunnel behind them." His soldiers retreated in controlled chaos, drawing the enemy deeper into the castle's entry corridor. The attackers pursued with the confidence of men who believed they had won. They poured through the shattered gates, filling the tunnel with bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. Then, at Aldric's signal, support columns were cut. The tunnel ceiling collapsed with a roar that shook the castle foundations. Tons of stone crushed dozens of attackers, sealing off reinforcements, but hundreds had made it through. The courtyard became a churning mass of bodies as defender and attacker met in brutal melee. Aldric descended from the battlements to join the fight. His wolf surged forward, demanding release, but he kept it leashed. Control. Morrigan had always preached control. The ability to channel rage into precision rather than wild violence. A young soldier, barely 18, fought beside him with desperate courage. The boy reminded Aldric of himself at that age, all idealism and unearned confidence. He watched the soldier defend a wounded comrade, placing himself between danger and a man who could not stand. "Your Majesty," the boy gasped during a brief respite, "I can reach the support columns, cut the remaining ones, trap more of them inside." Aldric understood immediately what he meant, and understood the cost. Anyone who cut those columns would be buried in the collapse, a death sentence delivered with full awareness. "No," Aldric said, "I will do it myself." "You are the king." The boy's voice held absolute conviction. "The kingdom needs you. I am just a soldier. Let me be a hero." Before Aldric could stop him, the boy sprinted toward the columns. Aldric reached for him, but Gareth's hand on his shoulder held him back. "No," the old captain said quietly. He made his choice. Honor it by letting him be what he chose. Aldric watched as the young soldier reached the columns and began cutting support beams with frantic strikes. The ceiling groaned, dust rained down, and then the boy looked back one final time, meeting Aldric's eyes across the chaos. He smiled, actually smiled. Then the ceiling buried him and a dozen more enemy soldiers in tons of rubble. The cost of command, the weight of watching good men die while you survived. Aldric had carried that burden for 15 years, but it never became easier. "His name," Aldric said to Gareth. "I need to know his name." Tobias Ashford, Bryn's younger brother. The revelation hit like a physical blow. The boy they had been searching for, the hostage used to manipulate Bryn into betrayal, had survived captivity only to die defending the castle. Aldric would have to tell her, would have to watch another warrior's face when learning someone she loved was gone. But first they had to survive. The battle continued with savage intensity. Courtyard stones ran red with blood. Bodies piled in corners where defenders had made desperate stands. The air reeked of death and smoke from burning siege equipment. Aldric lost sight of Rhea in the chaos. One moment she fought 3 enemies simultaneously. The next, a surge of attackers separated them. Panic clawed at his throat, a sensation he had not experienced since Morrigan's final days. Then he saw her, surrounded by 8 soldiers, wounded and exhausted but still standing. One attacker positioned himself behind her, blade aimed at her exposed back. Aldric tried to reach her, but 20 feet of churning combat stood between them. Too far, too many bodies. He would not arrive in time. Rhea must have sensed the danger. She began to turn, but the attacker was already committed to his strike. The blade descended toward the space between her shoulder blades, the killing blow seconds from landing. Time seemed to slow. Aldric heard his own heartbeat, felt his wolf screaming in his mind, watched helplessly as the woman who had made him believe in futures was about to die. Then light exploded across the courtyard. Rhea shifted mid-turn, but this was not the transformation Aldric had seen countless times before. Silver radiance erupted from her skin as her wolf emerged. The creature that materialized was massive, larger than any wolf Aldric had ever witnessed. Glowing lunar symbols covered her silver fur, ancient runes that pulsed with power older than kingdoms. Morrigan's blessing, the gift she had given Rhea 5 years ago, dormant until mortal danger activated its full potential. The transformation itself destroyed 3 attackers through sheer release of energy. The remaining 5 saw Rhea's new form and hesitated, their courage faltering in the face of something that should not exist. Rhea did not hesitate. She tore through enemies like they were made of parchment. Her jaws crushed throats. Her claws rent armor. She moved with impossible speed, a silver blur that killed with surgical precision. But as Aldric watched, he saw something else. Saw Rhea falter mid-strike, her massive head turning as if listening to a voice only she could hear. Her glowing eyes found his across the courtyard, and in them he saw recognition, understanding, and grief. Whatever this power cost, she had just learned the price. Rhea fought her way to Aldric's position, placing herself between him and 8 soldiers who had managed to surround the Alpha King. She killed them all with brutal efficiency, protecting him while he recovered his breath. When the last attacker fell, Rhea transformed back to human form. She collapsed immediately, blood streaming from a dozen wounds. Aldric caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest. "What did you do?" he demanded, though his voice came out gentle despite the words. "That transformation, that power, what was the cost?" "Later." Rhea's voice emerged weak but determined. "First we survive, then we discuss prices paid." Dawn broke over the battlefield, painting everything in shades of crimson and gold. Theron's remaining forces, seeing their advance faltering and their casualties mounting, began orderly retreat. They had failed to take the castle. The invasion had crumbled against defenders who refused to yield. Aldric surveyed the courtyard from the southern wall, Rhea leaning heavily against his shoulder. Around them, exhausted defenders began the grim task of counting bodies, separating friend from enemy, identifying the fallen so families could be notified. 3 sentinels had died in the fighting. Their bodies were carried to the memorial hall with honor, warriors to the last. 47 soldiers had fallen, including young Tobias, who had sacrificed himself to collapse the tunnel. But they had held. Against 2,000 attackers, 900 defenders had held Shadow Peak Castle. "We won," Rhea said quietly. "We survived," Aldric corrected. "That counts as victory." 4 days passed in blur of healing and recovery. Rhea's shoulder required stitches that would scar, a permanent reminder of the battle where Morrigan's blessing had fully manifested. She bore the marks without complaint, though Aldric noticed how she favored that side when she thought no one watched. On the 4th day, Bryn found Aldric in the courtyard where workers labored to repair the shattered southern gates. The dark-haired warrior's face was carefully composed, but he could see the grief she carried beneath that control. "Your Majesty," she said formally, Captain Gareth told me about Tobias, about what he did. He saved dozens of lives, collapsed the tunnel, and trapped enemy reinforcements outside. He was a hero." Aldric met her eyes steadily. "I am sorry. We searched for him for months, and when we finally found him, he died the way he chose." Bryn's voice cracked slightly. "They used him to manipulate me into betrayal. But in the end, he chose his own path, chose to be something other than a tool for evil men." She paused, then added more softly, "Thank you for honoring his choice by letting him make it. It was the hardest thing I have done, watching him run toward death while I stood safe." Aldric's throat tightened. "The cost of command is that you survive while others fall. Then we who survive must make their sacrifice mean something." Bryn straightened, and Aldric saw determination replace grief in her expression. "I want to expand the training programs, take what Morrigan taught us, and pass it forward to new recruits. Make sure her legacy endures not just in our generation, but in those who come after. Do it. You have full authority and whatever resources you need." Aldric placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your brother would be proud of what you are building from his sacrifice." That same afternoon, a messenger arrived from Shadowfen. Alpha Theron requested negotiation, offering his personal surrender in exchange for clemency toward his soldiers. The War Council convened to debate response. Lord Harwick argued for total war. Dame Celeste suggested accepting the surrender on strict conditions. Marcus provided intelligence about Shadowfen's weakened state. Gareth simply waited for Aldric's decision. "We accept," Aldric said finally, "on condition that Shadowfen territory be placed under Shadow Peak protection for 5 years. During that time, Theron's successor will rule under our oversight. Shadowfen soldiers will serve in joint defense forces." "Your Majesty!" Lord Harwick protested. "This shows weakness. We should end the threat without destroying an entire territory whose people are not responsible for their Alpha's crimes." Aldric's voice carried finality. "Theron stands trial alongside Alara. If found guilty, he dies, but his pack survives." The trial lasted 1 day. Evidence was overwhelming. Alara's letters, Theron's confession, testimony from rescued sentinels about the coordination between them. The council deliberated for less than an hour before returning guilty verdicts. On the 5th day after the battle, Shadow Peak held a double execution. The entire kingdom gathered to witness justice for Luna Morrigan's murder and the attempted conquest of their lands. Alara walked to the scaffold with her head high, refusing to show fear even as silver chains bound her. Her red hair caught morning sunlight one final time. She looked out over the assembled crowd with defiance that never wavered. Theron came next, his expression resigned. The massive Alpha, who had commanded 2,000 soldiers, now faced death with quiet acceptance. He had gambled for empire and lost. Some debts could only be paid in blood. Neither was granted final words. Their crimes spoke loudly enough. The executioner's blade fell twice. Justice, cold and absolute. Aldric watched from the royal platform, Rhea standing at his right hand. When it was done, when Alara and Theron's bodies were removed and the crowd began dispersing, she turned to him. "It feels hollow," she said. "Justice served, but Morrigan is still dead. The sisters we lost are still gone." "Justice is sometimes all we get." Aldric's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with easy familiarity. "But we can build something better moving forward." That evening, Aldric found Rhea in Morrigan's memorial grove at sunset. She stood before the shrine with expression of quiet contemplation. She turned as he approached, and something in her eyes suggested she had been expecting him. "We need to talk," they said simultaneously, then shared brief smiles at the synchronization. "You first," Rhea offered. Aldric took a breath, gathering courage. 5 days ago, I watched you nearly die protecting me. Watched that blade descend toward your back and felt something inside me shatter at the thought of losing you. And I realized that waiting, being cautious, honoring some arbitrary timeline before acting on what I feel, all of that is cowardice dressed as propriety. He moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I want to claim you as my mate. Not months from now when enough time has passed to satisfy tradition. Now, tomorrow, as soon as you will accept." His golden eyes searched hers. "We just survived a siege that should have killed us both. We know better than most that tomorrow is promised to no one. So I ask you now, Rhea Blackthorn, will you become my mate, my equal, my Luna?" Tears gathered in Rhea's eyes, though she did not let them fall. "Yes, but you need to understand the cost first." She pulled away gently, creating space between them. When she spoke again, her voice carried weight of confession. "During the battle, when I transformed into the Silver Wolf, I heard Morrigan's voice. Not imagination or hope, her actual voice, speaking through the blessing she gave me 5 years ago." Rhea's hands trembled slightly. "She told me the power that would save you required sacrifice, that I could not bear children and hold this strength simultaneously. I had to choose." The words struck Aldric like physical blows. "What?" "The blessing that made me strong enough to protect you, that activated when you were about to die, it demanded blood price." Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "I chose. In that moment, watching the blade descend toward your back, I chose your life over the possibility of children. And I would make the same choice again. But you deserve to know what claiming me means." Aldric stood silent for a long moment, processing implications. A Luna who could not produce heirs, the political complications, questions from council members about succession. All of it flashed through his tactical mind. Then he stepped forward and pulled Rhea into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. "You gave up motherhood to save me," he said roughly. "You sacrificed something fundamental because in that moment, my life mattered more to you than any future you might have wanted." "Yes, then I am claiming you anyway." He pulled back to meet her eyes, his voice fierce with conviction. "The council can object. The kingdom can whisper. I do not care. You are mine, Rhea Blackthorn, and I am yours. Everything else we will figure out together." "But the succession?" "We will adopt. Train a worthy warrior to lead after we are gone. Morrigan and I never had children. She lost the one pregnancy to Alara's poison. Biological legacy is not my path." His thumbs wiped away her tears. "What matters is what we build together, not whose blood inherits it." Relief flooded Rhea's expression. "You truly mean that?" "With everything I am." Aldric's voice softened. "The next full moon is 2 weeks away. Traditional mating rituals require that timing. Will you stand with me under that moon and accept my claim?" "Yes," Rhea whispered. "Yes." He kissed her then, gentle but certain. A claiming that would be formalized under the full moon, but began in this moment. Rhea kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, the mate bond that had been building between them finally acknowledged. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Aldric rested his forehead against hers. 2 weeks, he said, and then you become Luna of Shadow Peak. Are you ready for that burden?" "I have been ready since Morrigan marked me as chosen." Rhea's voice held quiet confidence. "I just needed to believe it myself." The 2 weeks passed in coordinated activity. The Moonguard Sentinels expanded as more warriors were recovered from various slave markets. 41 additional women were found and freed, bringing total strength to 115. The order Morrigan had built was not just restored, but strengthened. Rhea commanded them with the natural authority her predecessor had recognized years ago. She promoted Bryn to captain of the Eastern Forces, elevated Lyra to oversee all archery training, gave Kenna complete control of quartermaster operations. The sisterhood thrived under her leadership. Aldric watched it all with quiet pride, even as he managed the political integration of Shadowfen under Shadow Peak protection. The Joint Defense Forces proved more effective than either kingdom's military had been separately. Trade flourished. Borders remained secure. On the night of the full moon, the mating ritual took place in Morrigan's Memorial Grove. 115 sentinels attended as witnesses, forming a circle around the clearing. Aldric's 3 captains stood as his honor guard. The kingdom's high priest performed ancient rites in the old tongue, binding wolf to wolf and heart to heart. Aldric wore ceremonial garb that marked him as Alpha King, but his focus remained entirely on the woman before him. Rhea stood in traditional white robes, her dark hair unbound. The claiming mark on her neck from their kiss 2 weeks ago had faded to silver scar, soon to be joined by permanent bond. When the priest finished his recitation, Aldric stepped forward. "I claim Rhea Blackthorn as my mate, my equal, my Luna. Let all witness this bond formed not through obligation but through choice, through respect earned and trust built in fire, through sacrifice that proves love stronger than death. I claim Aldric Silvercrest as my mate, my equal, my king," Rhea responded, her voice carrying to every witness. Let all witness this bond formed through partnership, through shared purpose and recognition that strength takes many forms, through acceptance of prices paid and futures chosen. They moved together, and Aldric's teeth found the curve of Rhea's neck. The claiming bite was precise, deep enough to mark permanently, but controlled enough to avoid excessive pain. He felt the mate bond snap into place as his wolf recognized hers, a connection that wove through his consciousness and anchored him to her on levels beyond the physical. Then Rhea transformed partially, allowing her wolf's teeth to emerge. She marked him in return, establishing the equality she had demanded. Not subject to king, not warrior to alpha, but equal partners bound by choice rather than obligation. The bond flared bright when her teeth pierced his skin. Silver light surrounded them both, visible to every witness. And through that light, Aldric felt something he had not expected. The echo of Morrigan's blessing, approving, his first mate giving permission from whatever realm the dead inhabited. She had orchestrated this from the beginning, had blessed Rhea years ago knowing this moment would come, had prepared her chosen warrior to stand where she once stood. When the light faded, they stood before assembled witnesses as true mates. The sentinels howled approval, their wolf voices rising in celebration that echoed across mountain peaks. Later, in the royal chambers they now shared, Rhea stood before a mirror studying the claiming mark on her neck. Fresh and vivid, proof of bond that could not be broken. Aldric appeared behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders as his reflection joined hers. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. "About choosing your life over motherhood? About accepting your claim despite complications it creates?" Rhea leaned back against his chest. "No, only grief for what was lost, but that is not the same as regret. We could still pursue adoption, when you are ready. I would like that." She turned to face him directly. "Not to fill a void or satisfy expectations, but to give a lost child what Morrigan gave me. Home, purpose, the knowledge that chosen family can be stronger than blood. Then we will." Aldric kissed her forehead. "Whatever comes, we face together." They moved to the bed, lying together in comfortable silence. The mate bond hummed between them, warm and steady. Outside, the castle settled into night watch routines. Guards patrolled battlements. Sentinels maintained training schedules. Life continued its rhythm. 6 months after the battle, Shadow Peak had transformed. The Moon Guard Sentinels numbered 200 warriors, the largest force in recorded history. Women came from distant kingdoms, drawn by stories of the Luna who had survived slavery and led impossible victories. Shadowfen had been peacefully integrated. Theron's successor ruled competently under Aldric's oversight. The joint defense forces protected borders more effectively than either kingdom had managed alone. Trade flourished across territories that had been enemies months before. Aldric and Rhea ruled as equal partners, their bond visible in how they moved through decisions both military and political. Where he was tactical and reserved, she was fierce and direct. Where she sometimes lacked patience for political maneuvering, he navigated it with practiced ease. On a spring morning, Rhea found herself once again in the Memorial Grove. She visited often, speaking to Morrigan's shrine about challenges and victories, maintaining connection with the woman who had shaped everything she had become. "We found someone," she said to the stone marker. "A girl, 14 years old, living on the streets of the capital, half-starved and wholly feral. She reminds me of myself at that age." The wind rustled through oak leaves. "Aldric and I met with her yesterday, offered her home, training, purpose. She did not trust us at first. Too many broken promises in her past. But when I showed her my sentinel tattoo, told her about you, something shifted in her eyes." Rhea knelt beside the shrine, tracing Morrigan's name with gentle fingers. "We are going to adopt her, train her the way you trained me, teach her that warriors can be more than violence and survival." She paused, emotion thick in her throat. "We want to name her Morrigan, if that is acceptable, if it honors rather than diminishes your memory." Silver light shimmered at the edges of vision, there and gone so quickly it might have been imagination. But Rhea's wolf recognized the sensation, approval, blessing, permission to carry the name forward. She stood, feeling peace settle over her shoulders. The girl was being settled into quarters by Bryn, who had volunteered to serve as interim guardian until the adoption formalized. Kenna was preparing training schedules. Lyra had already begun teaching basic archery. The Sentinels had embraced the idea immediately. Another lost girl finding home among warriors. Rhea left the grove and returned to the castle where Aldric waited in their chambers. He looked up from reports he was reviewing, golden eyes warming when they found her. "How did she take the news?" he asked, cautiously optimistic. "She does not trust easily, but she agreed to try." Rhea settled beside him. "Bryn is with her now, showing her the training yards." "Good. Bryn understands what it means to transform guilt into purpose. She will be excellent influence." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Aldric set aside his reports and pulled Rhea close. "6 months ago, I stood in the Bloodstone Market and saw a woman on an auction platform, chains burning her wrists, defiance in every line of her body. I recognized Morrigan's mark on her skin and knew my life was about to change." "6 months ago, I stood on that platform convinced I would die enslaved," Rhea replied. "Then an Alpha King crashed my auction and looked at me like I mattered, like I was more than property." "You were always more. I just had eyes to see it." "We have built something good here," Rhea said softly, "something worth the prices we paid." Aldric thought about those prices. Morrigan's life, Rhea's fertility, young Tobias who sacrificed himself, the 3 sentinels who fell defending walls, all the costs that came with survival. "Yes," he agreed, "we have built something worth every sacrifice." That evening, Aldric stood on the battlements watching sunset paint the mountains in amber and gold. Gareth appeared at his shoulder, the old captain's presence as familiar as breathing. "Thinking about succession?" Gareth asked. "Thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind." Aldric gestured toward the training yard below, where Rhea was teaching young Morrigan basic defensive stances. "That girl will lead the Sentinels someday, will sit on my throne and rule territories we have secured, not because of blood, but because we chose to give her the tools necessary." The original Morrigan would approve. She orchestrated it, all of it. Aldric's voice held quiet wonder. From blessing Rhea 5 years before her death to hiding evidence only the right person would find, she saw paths I could not imagine. She was always 3 steps ahead of everyone. They stood together watching the training session below. Young Morrigan stumbled, and Rhea caught her with gentle hands, corrected her stance with patience, demonstrated the movement with fluid grace. "The Sentinels endure," Gareth observed, "stronger than before, 200 warriors where there were once 77. The kingdom thrives as well. Shadowfen integrated peacefully, borders secure, trade flourishing." Aldric felt satisfaction that had nothing to do with ego. "We did what we set out to do. And you found partnership again, found someone who makes you more than a widowed king." Aldric smiled. "Yes, I found that too." Below, the training session ended. Young Morrigan bowed to Rhea with awkward formality, and Rhea returned the gesture with equal seriousness. Then she ruffled the girl's hair with obvious affection. Rhea looked up toward the battlements, as if sensing Aldric's attention. Their eyes met across the distance, and the mate bond pulsed with warmth. She smiled, mouthed words he understood perfectly. "I love you." He returned the sentiment, then watched as she led young Morrigan toward the castle, toward home, toward the future they were building through choice. The sun set over Shadow Peak, painting the world in shades of gold. Guards changed shifts. Sentinels moved through evening routines. The castle settled into its nightly rhythm, secure in walls that had withstood siege and conspiracy. Aldric descended from the battlements and made his way one final time to the memorial grove. 3 shrines stood there now, Morrigan's, marking the Luna who had built the foundation. A second for young Tobias and all who had fallen defending the castle. And a third bearing simple inscription, "Those who gave everything." He knelt before Morrigan's shrine, hand resting on cool stone. "We honored you, Rhea and I together. We protected what you built and made it stronger. The Sentinels number 200, the kingdom thrives, and we are raising a girl who bears your name." Silver light shimmered around the shrine, warm as summer. Aldric felt peace wash over him. Morrigan's blessing, her recognition that he had done what she asked. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything you gave, for showing me that grief and love can coexist, for orchestrating all of this even knowing you would not live to see it completed." The light faded, but warmth remained. Aldric stood, feeling lighter than he had in years. The grief would never fully disappear, but it no longer crushed him. Instead, it grounded him, reminded him why every day mattered. He returned to the castle, where Rhea waited with young Morrigan. They sat together, Rhea telling stories of the original Luna, while the girl listened with wide eyes. Aldric joined them, adding his own memories. Outside, stars emerged in the darkening sky. The Moonguard sentinels endured. The kingdom thrived, and two people who had each lost everything had found something worth living for again. This was not the ending Aldric had imagined 6 months ago. It was better, earned through trial, forged in fire, real in ways fairy tales could never be. Perfect in its imperfection, bittersweet in its triumph. And as he watched Rhea teach young Morrigan about the Luna who had shaped them all, Aldric understood that some stories did not end. They simply transformed, became new chapters, continued forward through people who refused to let darkness win. The Sentinels endured, the kingdom was safe, and love earned through sacrifice would last forever. That was legacy enough for any lifetime.